A man was walking along a quiet country road when he noticed something strange in a ditch. At first, he thought it was just debris washed down by the rain. But as he got closer, he froze. It was the lifeless body of a French bulldog. What happened next would defy every expectation and change the lives of everyone involved forever. This is not just a story about a rescue. It's about hope, resilience, and the incredible will to live. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications so you never miss more inspiring stories like this one. And if this story touches your heart, share it with friends and family who believe in second chances. Rain stitched the gray afternoon together in crooked lines as Michael Hart eased his pickup along County Route 17. The wipers beat out a steady rhythm, thock-thock, pushing sheets of water off the windshield as fields blurred by. Winter-brown pasture, a stand of cedar, a drainage ditch frothing with runoff. He just delivered lumber to a client and was thinking about the invoices piling on his kitchen table when something dark at the edge of the road pulled his attention like a magnet. At first it looked like a clump of clothing. Maybe a plastic trash bag collapsed under the weight of the storm. But as the truck crawled closer, Michael saw the curve of a skull, the fold of a small ear flattened by rain, a compact, square-muzzled face smeared with grit. He braked hard and flicked on his hazards. Water drummed on the roof as he climbed out, boots sinking into the softened shoulder. The ditch was a narrow river of brown water, swirling around reeds and broken bottles. The little body lay half in, half out, the rain polishing its black fur to a slick sheen. A French bulldog, small, too still. "Hey, buddy," Michael said, crouching, voice rawer than he expected. "Hey!" Up close, the dog looked lifeless. Mud-caked paws, a nick on one ear, a nylon collar without a tag. Michael's chest tightened. He'd lost a dog once, years back, and learned how absence could echo in a house long after the food bowls were put away. He reached out and laid 2 fingers gently against the dog's chest. Cold. He pressed a little firmer, moving his hand until it rested behind the front leg where he figured a heartbeat would be. For a moment there was nothing, just rain on his jacket and the hiss of trucks on wet asphalt. Then, barely there, a flutter. Another. A faint, stubborn rhythm tapping against his skin like a moth behind glass. "You're not gone," Michael whispered. Relief hit so hard his eyes stung. Okay. He shrugged off his flannel overshirt and slid his arms under the dog, lifting as slowly as he could. The weight was wrong, too light, the limpness of a creature past fear. Mud slithered as he waded a step out of the ditch and set the dog on the grassy shoulder. He ran a palm along the ribcage, felt each one like piano keys, then checked the mouth. No foam, just river water and grit. Using the hem of his t-shirt, he wiped the nostrils clear and rubbed the chest in small circles, trying to coax warmth into the slick fur. The French bulldog's eyes fluttered, 2 dark stones under wet lashes. A thin sound escaped him, not quite a whine, more a breath remembering how to be. Michael's throat tightened again. A semi barreled past and threw a wave over them, cold water slapping his back. He glanced up and scanned the road. No signal on his phone out here, no houses within shouting distance, only a long slice of 2-lane and a sky hanging low and mean. The right call was obvious. Get him into the truck, get him warm, get him to a vet. He slid his flannel under the dog like a sling and lifted. The French bulldog's head lolled into the crook of his arm, rain ticking off the leathery fold of his cheek. "Stay with me," Michael said, the words automatic, a promise spoken to both of them. "We're going." He laid the dog on the passenger seat and cranked the heat, directing the vents down. From the glove box he tore a clean shop towel and tucked it around the small body. The truck smelled of damp wool and wet earth. When he touched the dog's chest again, the heartbeat was still there, weak, irregular, but present, and the breathing had shifted from ragged to tight and shallow. Michael thumbed the ignition and eased back onto the road. "Vet, vet, vet," he murmured, trying to orient the map in his head. 10 miles up, left at the feed store, across the bridge, the 24-hour clinic in Cedar Ridge. He reached for the phone again out of habit, then shoved it into the cup holder with a humorless laugh. No signal. Of course. A soft sound drew his eyes. The dog's tongue edged out, catching a bead of water on his nose. Under a fringe of lash, one eye cracked open and fixed on Michael in a way that pinned him to the seat. Not fearful, not accusing, just there like a thread pulling taut between them. "Hey," Michael said, cutting a glance from the road back to the dog. "You make it back with me, we'll figure the rest out. Food, a bath, maybe even a name." He drove a mile, then another, hands tight on the wheel, checking the rise and fall of the towel every few seconds. At the next curve, fresh tire tracks veered onto the shoulder and slid toward the ditch, gouging the mud. Michael's gut went cold. The tracks were new, sharp edges, no pooling. In the runoff tangled with weeds, something black glinted. A length of cut leash, plastic zip tie. He swallowed and drove on, pulse drumming now for more than one reason. Whoever left the dog there hadn't done it by accident. The rain began to ease as they approached town, clouds thinning into ragged strips. The Bulldog's breathing hitched once, twice, then steadied. Michael reached over at a long red light and rested his fingers lightly on the small sternum. The heartbeat tapped back, frail, insistent. "Good," he said. "Good." In the side mirror, a pickup had fallen in behind him, 2 truck lengths back. Old model, dull green, one headlight fogged over, the other too bright. It stayed there through the next turn. Then the next. Michael's mouth went dry. He took the longer route toward Cedar Ridge, across the bridge instead of the shortcut straight through town. The pickup followed, unwavering. He flicked his blinker right, then left at the last second and watched the mirror. The truck copied him again. He glanced at the French Bulldog, bundled like a coal of warmth he was trying to coax back to flame. "Hang in, buddy," he said, easing his foot down. "We're almost there." But as the clinic sign finally flickered into view, the green pickup slid closer, crowding the bumper, as if whoever was behind the wheel had just realized exactly where Michael was headed, and decided he didn't like it. Who was tailing them out of nowhere, and what would they do to keep a half-frozen French Bulldog from making it to safety? Michael's hands tightened around the steering wheel as the clinic's glowing sign blurred in the rain-streaked windshield. Just ahead, 2 more turns, and they'd be under bright lights with help on the way. But the dull green pickup behind him clung to his rear bumper like a shadow that refused to fall away. He darted a glance at the passenger seat. The French Bulldog, still swaddled in the flannel and towel, had shifted slightly. His chest rose and fell in short, determined breaths, his dark eyes half open now, following the sound of Michael's voice whenever he spoke. "You're gonna be okay, buddy," Michael muttered, trying to sound steadier than he felt. But his pulse thudded in his ears. Whoever was in that truck. Were they the ones who dumped the dog in the ditch? The road to Cedar Ridge narrowed, hemmed in by bare trees. Street lamps stood far apart here, casting pale islands of light across the asphalt. Michael flicked his blinker early, signaling a turn onto Pine Street, hoping the driver might keep going. He slowed, took the corner. The pickup followed. Michael's gut twisted. This wasn't coincidence. He considered flooring it, but the French Bulldog's fragile state kept him in check. A hard jolt or sudden stop could be dangerous. He needed to think fast. Up ahead, the veterinary clinic's parking lot glowed like a beacon, a rectangle of safety. But pulling straight in with the truck right on his tail might give whoever was behind him the chance to block him in. Instead, Michael eased past the clinic's entrance, heart hammering, and took the next left down a side street. The rain had slowed to a drizzle now, the hiss of the tires loud in the cab. The pickup followed again, its one glaring headlight filling Michael's mirror. That was it, confirmation. Michael scanned the street. To his right, an old gas station sat abandoned, its overhang sagging, windows dark. On his left, an alleyway cut between 2 buildings, just wide enough for his truck. He made the turn sharp into the alley, tires splashing through a shallow puddle, the walls of brick and cinder block closing in on both sides. The pickup roared past the alley's mouth, apparently caught off guard. Michael exhaled shakily, his breath fogging the glass. He stopped for a moment in the shadows, his mind racing. The bulldog gave a faint, questioning whine. Michael reached over and gently stroked the damp fur on his head. "We're still in this, little guy. Just a few more minutes." He backed out slowly, rejoining the main road, this time heading straight for the clinic without the unwanted tail. By the time he pulled into the parking lot, the vet techs inside had spotted him. A woman in blue scrubs was already rushing out with a blanket and a portable oxygen unit. "What happened?" she called, as Michael opened the passenger door. "Found him in a ditch. Barely breathing," Michael replied, handing the dog over carefully. "Somebody's been following me since." The tech's brow furrowed. "We'll take care of him. You should call the sheriff." As the bulldog disappeared inside, Michael stood in the glow of the clinic's entryway, rain dripping from the brim of his cap. Out on the road, a set of headlights slowed for just a moment before disappearing into the dark. Whoever had dumped that little dog hadn't expected anyone to stop, and now they knew someone had. Michael had a feeling this wasn't over. The next morning, Cedar Ridge still wore the damp chill of the previous night's rain. Michael parked his truck outside the veterinary clinic, a to-go coffee cooling in his hand, his thoughts fixed on the small French bulldog who had been rushed inside just hours ago. Inside, the air smelled faintly of antiseptic and wet fur. The front desk clerk recognized him instantly and offered a reassuring smile. "He made it through the night. The vet's still running tests, but he's stronger than we thought." Relief loosened something in Michael's chest. He hadn't realized until that moment how tightly wounded he'd been holding himself. "Can I see him?" "Of course, but the vet wants to speak with you first." A few minutes later, Dr. Harris, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, ushered Michael into a small examination room. On the table lay the bulldog, his short black coat clean now, his breathing steadier. His eyes lifted to meet Michael's, a faint spark of recognition there. "He's malnourished and dehydrated," Dr. Harris explained, "but there are no broken bones. We found traces of mud and small gravel embedded in his paws, suggesting he's been running, likely chased. And there's something else." The vet lifted a small collar from a counter, its leather cracked, the tag missing. "No identification, but this collar is expensive. Not something you'd expect on a stray." Michael turned the collar over in his hands. It smelled faintly of motor oil. Dr. Harris's voice dropped. "I'm not sure what happened to him, but whoever had him before didn't want him found. You mentioned someone followed you last night." Michael nodded. "A green pickup, one headlight out. They tailed me until I ducked into an alley." The vet's jaw tightened. "Then I'd suggest you be careful. Dogs like this, purebred French bulldogs, they're valuable. Sometimes people don't let go easily." Michael stayed with the bulldog for another hour, letting the little dog sniff his hand, speaking in a low voice until those bat-like ears perked up. When he finally left, he promised to come back later that afternoon. But he didn't go straight home. Instead, he drove back toward the rural stretch of road where he'd first spotted the black bundle in the ditch. The morning mist still clung to the ground, and the ditch's edges were slick with mud. Michael stepped out, scanning the ground. The rain had smoothed over much of last night's chaos, but here and there, deep tire ruts cut into the earth. He crouched beside one, running his fingers along the fresh grooves. Something caught his eye near the base of a tree, a scrap of black fabric, snagged on a jagged branch. He pulled it free. It was a piece of glove leather, stiff and wet, with the faintest imprint of a manufacturer's logo. Michael's mind began piecing things together. The expensive collar, the fresh tire tracks, the missing ID tag. This wasn't a random act of cruelty, it was deliberate. Someone had wanted the dog gone, but not lost forever. As he rose to leave, a distant engine rumbled. A truck appeared on the far curve of the road, moving slowly. Michael's pulse quickened. Through the fog, he could see the uneven glow of its headlights. One burned bright, the other was dead. The same green pickup. It slowed as it passed him, the driver's face hidden behind a wet, mud-streaked windshield. Then, without stopping, it rolled on. Michael knew then that the game had just begun. and he was already part of it. By the time Michael returned to Cedar Ridge that afternoon, the clouds had thickened into a low, gray ceiling, threatening another downpour. He parked a few blocks from the veterinary clinic, taking the long way on foot. Part of him wanted to see if the green pickup had followed him again. The streets were quiet, too quiet. A light drizzle misted the air, dampening his jacket. Halfway down an alley that cut toward the clinic, Michael froze. Parked at the far end, partly hidden behind a dumpster, was the same truck. Its engine was off, but steam rose faintly from the hood. Michael's first instinct was to walk past as if he hadn't noticed, but curiosity rooted him in place. The driver's side door creaked open, and a man stepped out. He was broad-shouldered, wearing a faded work jacket and a baseball cap pulled low. "Nice day for a stroll," the man said, his voice carrying just enough sarcasm to scrape at Michael's nerves. Michael didn't answer. He could feel the weight of the leather scrap in his pocket, the one he'd found snagged on that branch. "You picked up my dog last night," the man continued, taking a slow step forward. Michael's pulse thudded in his ears. "Your dog?" He was half dead in a ditch. The man's lips twitched in something that wasn't quite a smile. "Things aren't always what they look like. Now, why don't you tell me where he is?" Michael held his ground. "If you cared about him, you wouldn't have left him there." A shadow crossed the man's face. "You think you know what's going on, but you don't. That dog isn't just a pet. He's worth more than you can imagine." Clicked. "Not a family pet. Not a companion. Merchandise." "I'm not giving him back," Michael said firmly. The man's jaw tightened. "Then you'd better watch yourself. People get hurt over things like this." He stepped closer, his boots leaving deep prints in the wet pavement. "This is the last time I'm asking nicely." From the corner of his eye, Michael caught movement. A woman walking her Labrador was about to turn into the alley. The man noticed too and stopped, his expression flattening. Without another word, he turned, climbed into the truck, and drove away. Michael exhaled slowly, forcing his shoulders to relax. His hands were still trembling. When he reached the clinic, Dr. Harris was waiting. "You're just in time. He's awake, and he's been looking around for you." Inside the kennel room, the little black French bulldog perked up the moment Michael appeared. He struggled to his feet, tail giving a weak wag. Michael crouched beside him, scratching behind his ears. "You've got enemies, little guy," Michael murmured. "But you've got me too now." As he left, Michael couldn't shake the man's words. "He's worth more than you can imagine." It wasn't just about money. There was something deeper here, something dangerous. And Michael had just made himself a target. That night, Michael couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the man's face in the alley. Cold, determined, and willing to do whatever it took to get the dog back. The rain had returned, tapping against his apartment windows like an impatient hand. On the couch, the little black French bulldog lay curled on a blanket, his breathing steady but shallow. Michael had named him Shadow, for the way he followed him from room to room despite still being weak. Shadow's eyes never left him, as if he knew Michael was his last line of defense. At midnight, Michael decided to dig deeper. He pulled out the scrap of leather from his jacket pocket and studied it again. This time, he noticed faint stamped lettering, almost worn away by weather and time. He angled it under the desk lamp until the letters revealed themselves. Arlington Stud, N.O. 7. He typed the words into his laptop, and within minutes, a trail of results appeared. None of them simple. Arlington Stud wasn't a kennel. It was a high-end breeding operation based several states away, known for selling designer French bulldogs to celebrities and wealthy buyers. But the deeper Michael searched, the more disturbing the reports became. Articles about overbreeding, falsified health records, and dogs disappearing before investigations could be completed. Shadow stirred at his feet, letting out a soft whimper. Michael bent down to comfort him, but his eyes fell on something else. A faint tattoo inside Shadow's ear. He gently tilted the dog's head to read it. It matched the Arlington registry numbers. Michael's stomach tightened. Shadow wasn't just any dog, he was one of their top breeding males. That explained the man's words in the alley. worth more than you can imagine. The question was, how did Shadow end up dumped in a ditch? Michael decided to call in a favor. His old friend Clara worked as a reporter for a local news station. When she answered, her voice was thick with sleep, but it sharpened quickly as he explained. Michael, if you've got a purebred with ties to Arlington and they're looking for him, you need to be careful, Clara warned. These people have money, lawyers, and muscle. If they wanted him gone, there's a reason. Can you find out what that reason is? Michael asked. I'll try, she said, but you might not like what I find. The next afternoon, Clara met him at a quiet diner on the edge of town. She slid a thin folder across the table. Inside were photocopies of veterinary reports, purchase contracts, and a complaint filed with the state animal welfare department. One name appeared repeatedly: Vincent Harlow, owner of Arlington Stud. According to the documents, Shadow had developed a serious heart condition that would require expensive lifelong treatment. The reports indicated he was no longer viable for breeding, and his insurance policy had a clause allowing the kennel to euthanize non-productive stock. Michael's jaw clenched. So instead of treating him, they just threw him away? Looks like it, Clara said. But if Harlow knows you have him, he might try to make sure Shadow disappears for good, before anyone connects the dots. Michael looked out the diner window, the rain streaking the glass like tears. Shadow sat patiently beside him, his small body pressed close, unaware of the storm that still surrounded him. Michael reached down, resting a hand on the dog's back. Then we'll make sure he doesn't disappear. Not again. What Michael didn't know was that Vincent Harlow had already put a plan in motion, and the next move would hit far closer to home than he expected. The following morning was unnervingly quiet. Michael had barely touched his coffee when a sharp knock rattled his apartment door. Shadow lifted his head from the blanket, ears pricking, and let out a low growl. Michael froze. He wasn't expecting anyone. The knock came again, slower this time, deliberate. He stepped to the peephole and felt his pulse quicken. Two men in dark suits stood in the hallway, one holding a black leather briefcase. They didn't look like delivery drivers or neighbors. They looked like the kind of men who asked questions you didn't want to answer. Michael kept the chain on the door and cracked it open just enough. Can I help you? The man with the briefcase smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Mr. Collins? We represent Mr. Vincent Harlow. We believe you have something that belongs to him. Michael didn't answer. Shadow's growl deepened, his small frame tense and ready. The other man stepped forward, his voice a shade colder. We can make this very simple. Return the dog, and you'll be compensated generously. Refuse, and things might get complicated. Michael's grip on the door tightened. I don't know what you're talking about, he lied. Now, if you'll excuse me. Before he could close the door, the second man shoved a glossy photograph into the gap. It was Shadow, lying in Michael's living room, taken through the window from across the street. Michael's stomach sank. They'd been watching him. We'll give you 24 hours, the man said, his smile widening just enough to feel like a threat. Think about it. When they left, Michael bolted the door and pulled the blinds shut. Shadow climbed into his lap, his warm, solid weight grounding Michael in the moment. He knew running was the only option. Clara was the first person he called. They found me, he said, his voice low, and they're not asking nicely anymore. Michael, listen to me, Clara said. You can't stay there. Pack whatever you can carry and go somewhere they won't expect. Where's that? She hesitated. My uncle has a cabin in the mountains. It's off-grid. No cell signal, no neighbors. You can disappear for a while. By nightfall, Michael had stuffed a duffel bag with essentials and tucked Shadow into a travel carrier. The rain had returned, slicking the streets as he drove north. Every set of headlights in the rear view made his pulse jump. 2 hours into the drive, Michael noticed a black SUV following at a steady distance. It had been behind him since the last gas station. His grip on the steering wheel tightened. He turned off onto a smaller road, hoping to lose them in the backroads. But the SUV turned too. Shadow whimpered softly from the carrier. Michael's mind raced. He couldn't lead them to the cabin. Up ahead, he spotted an old service station with a flickering open sign. He pulled in quickly, cutting the engine and slipping into the shadows behind the building. The SUV slowed as it passed, its tinted windows revealing nothing. Then, finally, it kept going. Michael exhaled for the first time in miles. He crouched down by the carrier, meeting Shadow's wide, trusting eyes. "Hang in there, buddy. We're almost safe." But deep down, he knew safety was only temporary. Harlow's reach was long, and if Michael wanted to protect Shadow for good, he'd have to do more than run. Michael reached Clara's uncle's cabin just before dawn. The place was exactly as she'd described. Small, hidden in a thicket of pines, the road ending in a gravel turnoff that no one would stumble upon by accident. Shadow immediately seemed calmer, trotting around the wooden floor with his stubby legs, sniffing at everything before curling up by the fireplace. For the first time in days, Michael allowed himself a deep breath. But it didn't last. Clara arrived that afternoon, her old truck loaded with supplies. She didn't waste time. "We can't keep running, Michael. The longer we hide, the more desperate Harlow will get." "I know," he said quietly. "But what choice do we have? He has money, connections. He'll never stop. That's why we don't just hide," she said, pulling a thick folder from her bag. "We hit him where it hurts, publicly." Inside were photographs, documents, and receipts Clara had been gathering. Proof of illegal breeding operations, neglect, and cruelty tied directly to Vincent Harlow's name. And among them was the most damning piece. Veterinary records showing Shadow's microchip had been altered, his original owner's information replaced to erase his past. Michael stared at the evidence, his hands trembling. Not from fear, but from possibility. "If we release this, it'll ruin him," Clara finished. "But we need the right moment and the right people watching." That night, Michael set up a meeting with an investigative journalist he trusted, someone who'd once exposed a corrupt city council. They agreed to meet in 2 days at a cafe in the nearest town. The morning of the meeting, Michael drove down the mountain, Shadow in the passenger seat, his little black ears perked up. Clara followed in her truck as backup. Halfway there, Michael's phone buzzed. A single text from an unknown number. "You should have taken the deal." Before he could respond, a dark SUV appeared in the rearview mirror. Familiar, relentless. It accelerated, closing the distance. Clara's voice came over the CB radio they'd borrowed. "Michael, don't stop. Get to town. I'll slow them down." He didn't want to leave her, but he knew she was right. Gritting his teeth, he pressed the gas. Shadow braced his paws against the dash, eyes fixed forward like he understood the stakes. Michael reached the cafe just minutes before the journalist. They shook hands quickly, Michael sliding the folder across the table. "Everything you need is in there, but you have to move fast, before they find me." The journalist flipped through the evidence, his expression hardening. This could shut him down for good. A shadow fell across the table. Michael looked up to see Vincent Harlow himself standing there, flanked by 2 of his men. "Brave move, Mr. Collins," Harlow said smoothly. "But let's be adults. Hand over the dog, and this little leak disappears." Michael stood slowly, his heart pounding. "No, Vincent. This time you disappear." Right on cue, the journalist's cameraman, hidden in the corner, stood up, capturing every word on film. The cafe had grown silent, every patron now a witness. Harlow's confident smile faltered. He glanced around, realizing too late that the walls had closed in. Michael reached down, resting a hand on Shadow's back. "This dog isn't property," Michael said, voice steady. "He's a survivor, and so am I." Within an hour, the footage and documents were on every major news outlet's website. By evening, police had raided Harlow's estate. Back at the cabin, Michael sat on the porch with Shadow in his lap, watching the sun dip behind the trees. Clara joined him, handing him a mug of coffee. "You did it," she said softly. "We did it," Michael corrected. He looked down at Shadow, who was now dozing peacefully. And so did he. For the first time in what felt like forever, Michael knew they were truly safe. not just hiding free.